And welcome to today's event on managing your client's risk tolerance. We have with us presenting Jeff Davey, Michael Goodman, and Deborah Fox. This event is brought to you by the AICPA PFP section, the premier provider of information, resources, advocacy, and guidance for CPAs who specialize in providing estate, tax, retirement, risk management, and investment planning advice to individuals. It's my pleasure to introduce today's panel. Jeff Davey is a co-founder and director of Finametrica. He is the creator of the Finametrica risk profiling system and manages the company's ongoing research activities and relationships with academic and research institutions. He has a number of years of experience in the financial planning profession prior to founding Finametrica. Michael Goodman is president of WellStream Advisors, which he founded to employ a caring and total financial planning approach to wealth and investment management. He is active in his field and beyond serving clients, continues to learn and share his knowledge and experiences with other professionals. He's an active volunteer at the AICPA, having served as conference chair for the annual Advanced Personal Financial Planning Conference, which has been higher rated than its entire two-decade history under Michael's leadership. He also currently serves on the Financial Literacy Commission and the PFP Executive Committee Media Task Force. Deborah Fox has been a practicing financial planner for over 25 years and is founder of Fox Financial Planning Network. She is nationally known for her unique planning processes and for instructing and coaching tax professionals and financial advisors on how to work more efficiently in order to free up time and increase revenues, all while delivering a higher level of client service. So we're pleased to have the three of them with us today, and with that, I will hand the presentation over to Jeff to begin.
Thank you, Sarah. I also should say, perhaps in my financial planning practice, we did have an accounting arm, and I think the combination of financial planning and accounting is a very powerful combination and can lead to an extremely successful business model. So I think what I'm talking about here today is particularly relevant to the audience. I have an agenda. I'm going to be mainly talking about business development opportunities with a couple of extra bits that I think are relevant. I'm going to start off talking about positioning. With introducing any new service to a client, how you position it is going to have a significant impact on how they react to it. So it's important to position well before you start. I'm not going to talk about compliance, but I am going to talk about business risk management. I tend to see compliance as the low hurdle in the foreground. The bigger risk, bigger in terms of its likely impact on you, is the possibility of having a legal claim made, and I want to talk about that aspect of managing clients' risk tolerance. The points that we're going to make during today's presentation actually apply all the way across the stages, if you like, of the client experience, from when somebody first thinks that they might be interested in dealing with you. So you're looking to attract prospects. You're then looking to convert prospects to clients, developing new client relationships and strengthening existing client relationships. The quality of the client relationship is critically important to their satisfaction, the success of the practice, your satisfaction, and you start it with a new client and continue to develop it. And the final thing I want to talk about is retaining clients. Okay. In terms of positioning, these all will lead to more profitable, more valuable, more satisfying practice. In terms of positioning, you might want to answer the question, who is Finametrica? If you're talking about introducing a new service provider into the mix you provide, here's just some information about us, and you can use some or all of it. We have on our website, we have a couple of flyers that you can use with clients to explain about Finametrica and also to explain about our system. Oh, sorry, let me go back a bit. The last point on this list is really for your benefit. I'm not suggesting you raise the issue of legal claims with clients, but essentially in 15 years we've got a blemish-free track record. These are a whole raft of different points about our system, how it works with clients. Again, you might take some of these and put them into an email or a statement that you make to clients. The ones that I focus on in the discussion today are highlighted here in red. Some of the things about using a system like ours is you can, in a questionnaire, ask probing questions that would be difficult to ask face-to-face with somebody. The report provides 18 touch points. Now, this exercise, the risk tolerance testing assessment exercise, is really about the conversation. What you're trying to do is have an objective starting point for the conversation. And in the report, there are up to 18 different what we call touch points, where there will be aspects that would lead to discussion with client where you can learn things you wouldn't otherwise learn. In particular, the process of identifying and dealing with inconsistencies is important. None of us are perfectly consistent. Where we are inconsistent in our attitudes towards things, that needs to be recognised and needs to be dealt with. And that sort of applies doubly with couples. Couples are very rarely have sort of precisely the same risk tolerance, and in about 60% of cases there is a significant difference in risk tolerance. Risk matches need to be identified, and a risk match risk mismatch is where risk required, which is the risk that's required to achieve goals, it doesn't line up with risk capacity, which is the risk that the client can afford to take, or their risk tolerance. Now, the risk profiling process was discussed in the previous webinar, and I understand many, if not most of those in the audience today were in the previous one. We talked about transparent trade-off decisions. There are nearly always compromises required. People can't get exactly what they want when they want it, or in a couple, each can't get exactly what they want. And so there'll be trade-off decisions. They need to be made in a way that's clear to the client and they can actually make the decision. The whole process is one of collaborative decision-making. And that's an important part to establish a good working relationship with a client. And clients understanding risk and return is extremely important. You've got to make sure that they have reasonable expectations. So I think all these points will be covered somewhere in as we go forward. Let's talk about business risk management. This is the problem. If you get a legal claim, this is the stance that your client is going to take. I was overexposed to risk and I didn't understand the risks I was taking. And that can be a difficult exercise to defend because courts are predisposed to look after a damaged investor, and you also run into the problem that you don't want to leave it down to your word against theirs, because again, courts know that the client has had one conversation, has been dealing with one financial advisor, and is more likely to remember the details of the conversation than is the advisor who has hundreds of these sort of conversations with clients. Dealing with it is a two-part strategy. The first is to reduce the likelihood of a claim in the first place. And this sounds, it sounds so blindingly obvious. If you give good advice, right, good advice with regard to risk, that's the most important thing you can do. Most of the claims that arise because the advisor has given bad advice, particularly bad advice with regard to risk. Yes, there's the odd vexatious litigant, and yes, some clients can be very difficult, but giving good advice will reduce the likelihood of the claim. The other thing is to make sure no unpleasant surprises. They must have realistic expectations about what can happen on the journey they're about to embark on. And the other is, don't just have the conversation once. Make it part of the annual review so that you strengthen the original advice, or if something's changed in the client situation, you can in fact adjust. So that's reducing the likelihood of a claim, and that in itself is important because any claim is going to be time-consuming dealing with it, and it's demotivating and energy sapping. Then you want to be able to defend the claim if it goes to that stage. And you've got to be able to prove you gave suitable advice. And it covers a whole lot of different aspects. And these are things that we think are necessary, and these are things that we think the process we talk about actually delivers. You start off with, yes, I used a rigorous risk tolerance test, something that stands up to scrutiny. It was plain English. I was able to get client confirmation that this was an accurate description of them and that I could rely on it. We looked at inconsistencies and the mismatches. We discussed alternatives. The trade-off decisions were made transparently. Those trade-off decisions were made by the client, not by me. I made them clear. But it was the client's life we were talking about. They had to make the decisions, and that shifts responsibility for the decisions to the client. And they had realistic expectations, and that's what you need to be able to prove. And this is essentially proving informed consent, and it's about documentation. Document, document, document. This is a fairly long quote, but I think it's a very relevant one. Rob Cadell is one of the earliest financial planners in Australia, one of the original CFPs. CFP started down here in 1992, I think it was. He had been a litigation lawyer beforehand, and he has been Financial Planner of the Year down here. So he's a well-respected figure in Australia. Here he's talking about his views both as a financial planner and previously as a litigation lawyer and somebody with considerable experience doing planning and considerable experience of Phenometrica. I think that's a fairly positive reinforcement. Okay, enough on business risk management. Excuse me a second, I have to cough. I now want to talk briefly about attracting prospects. We're all always looking for prospects. How do you go about doing that, and how do you do that around risk and risk tolerance? And you've essentially got two methodologies, or you've got, step back a bit. The first thing you need to think about in this context is, what is the client going to be interested in? What are client or prospect or consumer motivators around risk? Clients know that risk is important. They don't want to be overexposed to risk. They want to understand the risks they're taking. They want to be confident you understand them and their risk tolerance. They want to see that you regard risk as important, that you regard their risk tolerance as important. They're interested in learning about themselves and how they compare to others. And in couples, they want to understand one another, and they want to feel in control where they can. Now, the difficulty for clients is a lot of what we do, they're not going to be able to understand. They're going to have to trust us. But the bits that they can understand, important to try and make sure they do understand them, to give them some feeling of control over what's going on. And all these sort of motivators, these are things that can be used in attracting prospects. These are the sort of messages around these things will resonate with prospects. There are two ways to do it. There may be more, but there's certainly two. One is community education, and the other one is social media. And these are, I know, two hot topics with Deborah Fox, and I'd like to hand over to her to talk about these two methodologies for attracting prospects. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to talk about this particular topic because I think there are so many great opportunities right now to attract new clients to our businesses. For those of you that don't know, I am a practicing financial advisor as well as a consultant to the industry. So I have my own firm, and we are finding that there are some great conversations to have with clients right now with everything that's happening in the economy and the markets. And the Finametrica tool can be a great differentiator in actually prospecting. So before I actually cover exactly the information that I wanted to share with you on these two marketing approaches, let me just mention that if you could visualize a funnel, because every time we want to attract a new prospect, we need to think of this funnel that would be in place. The marketing funnel is first making a prospect aware of you, so creating awareness. The second step would be consideration, where they are considering potentially working with us. The third step would be preference, where they've actually decided that they want to do business with us. And then taking action would be fourth, and then loyalty would be fifth, so that we've now created a very loyal client. And then the last one would be advocacy. So not only have they decided to do business with us, but they are now telling others about us, and we get that referral pathway going. So I love community education programs to start with the top step, which is the awareness, because you can take an educational approach without putting any type of sales components to the program. I think that's extremely important, because once someone starts selling something, a lot of people just completely stop listening. And so by providing valuable content for a prospect, or even better yet, a group of prospects, you can really start building a relationship with them. So for a community education type of workshop, you want to provide education on some sort of hot topic. And so maybe I think a hot one right now would be on the investment side. You know, how should I invest the funds I have sitting in cash right now? Something, you know, some title that would address that issue. There are a lot of people that have a lot of cash sitting in their portfolio, either because they sold out back in 2000, 2008, and 9 and haven't had the guts to get fully back in the market yet, or they've acquired other cash that they were too chicken to invest to deploy in the market over the last 4 years. So I don't know if you're seeing this, but we're seeing a lot of cash. In fact, I had an appointment yesterday where 85% of the client's investment funds are sitting in some sort of cash position, and he's ready to make a move. And so if you can give some ideas there, that would be good. Another one would be why many investors' retirement portfolios are either too conservative or too risky right now. And the Finametrica tool has some great ways to be able to demonstrate that for clients. So you could actually do an education program and then be able to follow up, have them follow up with you for some sort of free analysis. So you provide education on a hot topic, and then instead of you putting the event out as your event, try to become a guest speaker for some sort of group. It could be Rotary or some society of dentists or chiropractors, some sort of group that has regular meetings where they bring in guest speakers and you come up with a compelling topic that would be valuable to their members or their group, and they advertise that on your behalf, and you get what's called kind of the halo effect. If they bring you in as a speaker, it increases your credibility significantly. And then at the end of your presentation, you offer some sort of complimentary report or white paper, something that would be valuable to the attendees as a takeaway that they can opt in to receive. So they would fill out some sort of, you could have an evaluation form where they can opt in to receive that particular piece that you would make available. And then that's a permission to be able to communicate with them going forward. So your job is just to become very likable to them, to build that relationship with your audience, and you get, instead of doing individual presentations to all of these different people that would be in that room, you get to speak at one time to a whole group, and they self-select. You'll find who's interested in learning more about what you might do. So that, using the Phenometrica tool, you could actually figure out where, identify when the current allocation cannot achieve the minimum return needed for the client to succeed, or identifying the discomfort of when an investor is taking too much risk when it's not necessary, covering how to address periods of below average returns. There's obviously tons and tons of points that you could bring up, but you want 3 gold nuggets, 3 takeaways where that attendee to that presentation, after you're finished, thinks, wow, that was great information, that was very helpful to me. So that would be an example. Social media is a whole new animal for a lot of advisors now, and can be a little bit difficult sometimes to get our arms around it, but there are tremendous opportunities by using social media. You can differentiate yourself with prospects. Best of all, you can really build deeper relationships with clients, and again, in a more global way. Instead of having to try to communicate individually with people through social media, you can put information out that goes to dozens or hundreds or even thousands, depending on how much you embrace this type of marketing. And you can get the word about your approach to providing financial planning services, what differentiates you from other firms, and using the power of social media to actually communicate. So you have really 4 main components, I think, of a social media campaign, which would be LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and then you also have Google Plus and a couple other things now, but I think the 4 main ones are LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and a blog. And they all can be integrated so that you write something for one and it's going to show up on the other ones, or you're having them go from one to follow you on something else. I think for bringing in new prospects, attracting new prospects to a financial planning firm, LinkedIn should be your prime social media emphasis. And the reason is there's been studies that have shown that most of the type of clients that we would all be interested in working with, almost all of them now go to look up an advisor on LinkedIn. That's like the first place they go. They look for that business profile. So I think working, if you haven't started on the social media marketing campaign, then you want to really, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you want to create one. If you do have one, you want to make sure you really work on that first and get it really sharp where it's really communicating who you are and what you're doing. So you want to ensure that your profile is complete and that it's robust and that you're using status updates to keep your profile fresh. And you use it to share information, share links to interesting articles. And in this case, if you're starting with a risk profile or risk tolerance type of education campaign, you could share interesting articles about risk tolerance specifically. you can reference your use of Finametrica profiles as an important client tool, and it is a differentiator. I have a new financial planning client that just came on board with us the last couple months. She's been working with a broker for the last 10 years, a star broker, one that made, you know, this Worth magazine top financial advisor list. That was the thing that really convinced her that that was the advisor for her, because she must be doing a great job since she was chosen as one of these top advisors in the country. And when we analyzed her portfolio, we saw that she wasn't allocated according to her risk profile based on how she filled out a Finametrica risk profile. We pointed that out to her, and she said, well, my broker has never had any of this type of discussion with me. I mean, we've just superficially covered risk profile, but nothing where there's this deep discussion. So she now is completely convinced that she's not getting the personalized attention that we're giving her from the 10 years that she's been with her broker. So that's a good example of just how you can use Finametrica and put those kinds of stories. You have to be careful from a compliance standpoint how you write them, but these are the kinds of things that you can use social media to get a story out in a very immediate way and find differentiators. And then Twitter is focusing on interesting conversation. Don't promote yourself. In fact, all of these in these social media things, you shouldn't be salesy or even marketing. It's just putting information out that you're dripping on people, and you want to retweet others' comments. That's how you can get new followers, just by finding interesting things that your audience will, your followers will find interesting. Talk in general about the importance of understanding one's risk tolerance rather than telling about your firm and how you're doing it. And occasionally you can mention that you offer a Finametrica profile on your website, which Finametrica has the capability of actually providing code for you on your website so that they can get a free profile and fill that out. That's great for prospecting potentially too. And then for Facebook and Google+, it's a similar strategy as for LinkedIn, but a little bit more visual. You're using more photos, like motivational posters, something like that, and using occasional insights and link to your website or blog that as appropriate. And then your blog is really a way for you to get more extensive information out, where you're writing opinions, writing about industry trends, writing about things that you're seeing from your clientele, some of the issues that they're dealing with, the concerns, the successes of what's going on in the marketplace and in your practice. But again, you don't have to be marketing oriented. It should just be a way for them to get to know you better. And if you don't yet have a blog, that's it. Okay, sorry. You do cut me off.
So
go ahead. That's fine.
I'm sorry, Deborah. I thought you'd do what. I thought you had closed there, and I'm a bit conscious of the time.
Yes, go ahead. I was just about finished, so I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. The next point is converting prospects to clients, and this is one of the areas where you can see an immediate benefit once you start working with Finametrica. This is a quote from Dave Yeski. Some of you will know Dave. He's a very high-profile, very highly respected financial planner, very active in the Financial Planning Association, and is a very strong advocate of evidence-based advice, and looked into Finametrica in quite a lot of detail before deciding to use it with Elizabeth Buey in their practice. The points that Dave is making there, I think we can expand on those a little bit. The first thing is that it does establish a connection. It's a personal connection. it's not just about their financial affairs, it's about them as people. And the client relationship is very influenced by the strength of the personal connection. It will distinguish you from your competition. As Dave commented, it gives you a competitive advantage. Clients don't need to be persuaded that risk is important or risk tolerance is important, so a point of difference on this topic is going to be important. It will demonstrate empathy because you get the opportunity to talk about them as people, and empathy is critical to building trust. It does position risk and risk tolerance as important, and that's something that's going to be important to them. It educates about what a risk profile is. In last week's webinar, Beth Gamble was talking about how their firm positions the risk profiling exercise, the bigger picture, so clients have an understanding of where they're going and the role of risk tolerance in that. You do learn more about them as individuals and the interplay in couples. And in fact, one of our subscribers said, last time I was in the US, came up to me and he said, I think I learn more in the first 2 hours of interaction with a client than I used to learn in the first 2 years. It gets to a deeper level in the conversation very quickly. And it delivers a value add right at the start. You're not just selling yourself, you're actually providing something that's of value to the client. So lots of opportunities to convert prospects to clients. Developing new client relationships. Here's another quote from Dave Yeski. Again, it's what you're trying to do is to be able to connect the client to their advice, to the advice that you're giving, to give them confidence in it, to constantly advise and confidence in you. And the way you manage risk tolerance will influence greatly the quality and the depth of the conversations you can have with clients. Developing new client relationships. Okay. It's about know the client, and it's know the client as an individual. Identifying inconsistencies and mismatches are important. All clients have them. It's what makes them unique. Your recognition of that demonstrates your connection with the client. It leads to transparent decision-making about trade-offs. In the case of the client that Deborah was just talking about, that client didn't understand why she was doing what she was doing, or why she was doing it. And done properly, the risk tolerance conversation does make these trade-off decisions. It highlights them and enables them to be made in a way that the client can understand. They finish up with a much, much better explanation, understanding of risk and return. And that's critically important. Clients need to know the journey they're about to undertake. You've recommended a strategy. They need to know how that's likely to roll out over time. They're going to be better connected to your advice. They're going to understand what they're doing and why. It's a collaborative process which gives people confidence that they're actually part of it. And all of these things build trust in you and the respect that's necessary to actually have a successful relationship. Getting the relationship started with a new client is only the first step. There's then building on that relationship, and with existing clients, introducing Phenometrica with your existing clients, you'll find is a real opportunity for you. Again, in last week's conversation, Beth was talking about this. She's saying it transformed the conversations that they were having with clients. Was able to educate them and identify the trade-offs so that they understood them. And a bit more from Beth. And just an interesting, we get this feedback from subscribers all the time, but here we've got a 20-year client saying that, an established client saying that the the Finometrica process was the single most useful tool that they'd ever been given during that period. So it can have a big impact on existing client relationships. What it can do is rectify any misconceptions that are there, and there can be misconceptions. It will add to clients' understanding of what they're doing and why. It better connects clients to their plans and advice. It reinforces you as the trusted advisor. Reviews established clients, it can be difficult to keep the relationship fresh. Clients do, I know from my experience, they do tend to take your services for granted. They do tend to assume that other advisors are as good as you are. It really is a continuing effort to make sure that they actually appreciate your strengths. What will happen is that you get more satisfying relationships, more satisfying for them, more satisfying for you. They're easier to service and they're more likely to refer. Now, I've just covered those three fairly quickly. Michael, can I get you to comment on your experiences, I guess, on these issues, on converting prospects to clients, establishing relationships with new clients, and strengthening existing relationships, if you would, please.
Sure. We've found it to be very powerful in every element of the relationship, both at the beginning, in the middle, and along the way after we've worked with somebody for quite a while even. And I'll give you some examples as to what I mean by that. But when you have a potential prospect meeting coming in and we send a little checklist of things to bring, that makes them take the meeting more seriously. But when we send an invitation to log on to Finometrica and complete the survey, they not only take us more seriously, but they take the meeting more seriously. They've now invested some time into it. They start to get a sense of the professionalism that we have, that it's not just a meeting where we're looking to convert them to a client, but a meeting where we're really looking to dig in to understand what's important to them so that they can understand and make a decision that this is going to be a valuable relationship for both parties. And I've found that the more you can make those initial meetings into a valuable time for the client or the prospect in that case, the more likely they are to move forward. And, you know, they say, I don't know who they are, but I've read several times in publications over the years that one of the reasons that clients stick with you or join with you is because they believe you, quote, get them, that you understand them. And I believe strongly that this process of using Finometrica is one way to ensure that they believe and understand that you get them. And it's also a way that's been harder to do in the past. There's ways to show that you get them as far as asking a lot of probing questions and give them back. But it's been very hard. As a matter of fact, I still don't know of any other way to really effectively show them that you get them from a risk standpoint. So I think it's very valuable in initiating a relationship. The powerful thing once they become a client and now you're really starting to build the portfolio and their financial plan is that the Finometrica just starts the conversation. It's not an end result. I look at it as more of a beginning, and that what this does now is allow us to ask meaningful risk questions that are not sort of just canned and the judgment assumptions that we have historically been tempted to make in the past. But these are questions, well, tell me a little bit how you felt about that process. What did you think about your score? I see that you estimated your risk level at this, but it came in at that. How do you feel about that? And then the really powerful stuff comes into play where you have, a couple as clients, and they did not score the same. Because that's always been a very hard thing for me to reconcile, and it's been a very hard thing for me to manage in sort of understanding, especially when one client is less vocal than the other. So now you have a way to sort of demonstrate that one person sits at one end of the spectrum or at one point on the spectrum, let's just say, and the other sits here. And you can have that dialogue further to reconcile between them, to see where we should come about and what would be the most sense for their portfolio going forward. And it's also helpful because in a lot of couples, there tends to be one dominant person in a meeting, and now this way of mechanizing that initiating process gives voice to the person or the client that might not have been as valuable. As vocal. And then finally, I think where, Jeff, you alluded to this earlier on, in all our service meetings, every one of our service meetings, we use an agenda, but there's always an agenda item that focuses on investments. And we've always explained to our clients that your investments allocation is comprised of three things. The rate of return you need to earn, which we can prove from our financial planning software and cash flows, their time horizon, which is sort of obvious based on their age, and three is their risk tolerance. And those first two, we've always had some math to back it up. But now with Phenometrical, we have this scoring system and this process to back it up. So we explain to the client these three things develop your portfolio. This is how we initiate the discussion on those three things. This is the allocation we've come up with. Is this still okay? Has anything changed? So it's sort of given us this process in every one of our service meetings to reaffirm, rediscuss, and give clients comfort and confidence when they walk away that this is how they're allocated, not because of what's happening in the markets, but because this is what makes sense for their financial plan. So we have found it to be helpful in that way as well, Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I have another quote which is sort of it links 2 points. The first part of it is about it is we've all had the experience of dealing with market downturns. Back in my planning days, we lived through October '87 in Australia, and on the 17th of October, markets in Australia fell 40% in a day, and people thought the sky was falling, and it continued to go down for a month. And the effort involved in, and it taught us that I'm not even sure we understood the risks our clients were taking, but they certainly didn't. And it was a very difficult time. Huge amount of effort went into reassuring clients, servicing clients, etc., etc. And this quote is, from a UK subscriber of ours, talking about what happened back in '07, '09. And these are clients who are easier to service. They're not as panicked. We've got that comment. They're not happy that their investments are falling, but it was within their range of expectations. Which sort of leads into the second point, which is retaining clients. Where you run into a problem is if what happens to the client is not within their range of expectations. What that does is that the first effect of that is to bring your advice into question. Why didn't I know this could happen? Can I actually continue to trust my advisor? The difference between that and, oh yes, my advisor did actually warn me that this was a possibility, is chalk and cheese. And you've got a client who's not happy but was in their range of expectations, talking to a friend or family member who is absolutely devastated by what's going on. And firstly, the client understands the value of your service because they were prepared, and you're likely to pick up another client as a result of the conversation. Okay, so we're talking about retaining clients. Daniel Kahneman is one of my heroes, I guess. And he just says some really simple, very clear things, and I love this one. And it's so true. Nobody wins, except the lawyers, if a relationship ends unhappily. Couple more quick comment. I started off talking about minimising the likelihood of claims. What you're trying to do is not make mistakes. One of the easiest mistakes to make is to misread somebody's risk tolerance. If you don't have an objective way a rigorous way of doing that, it is very easy to misread somebody's risk tolerance. Here's another quote from Rob Cadell. We often get asked, well, sort of, can you prove that your system works? And we say, well, we've got no successful claims in 15 years. We've got lots of anecdotal feedback from subscribers' testimonials, which are on our website. But this one is particularly about, essentially, within the same firm, one team using Finometrica and one team not using Finometrica. And the team that wasn't using Finometrica lost clients. And losing a client is a very expensive exercise. Okay. So that's really it. I've covered off most of what I wanted to say. I just want to make a comment at the end. What we're actually talking about is we're talking about a net increase in clients for you. That's the first thing. Whether that's because you've attracted prospects you wouldn't have attracted, converted prospects you wouldn't have converted, or not lost clients you would have otherwise lost. So you have an increase in client numbers. That's the first thing. The second thing is the income stream that you do have is going to be more valuable, because a potential purchaser nowadays almost certainly is going to want to do some due diligence on you. They're going to want to see if there are any time bombs sitting in your files. And one of the biggest time bombs is if you haven't been doing risk tolerance properly. If you can show a rigorous systemised process for dealing with it, it will increase the multiplier on your gross fees. The other thing specifically for accountants doing financial planning is a new client can mean not only a new financial planning client, but can also mean a new accounting client, because so you get a double win. So it is one of the areas where you really can generate more profit and add value to your practice, and it's much more satisfying. Clients are happier, you're more confident in your advice, the whole thing just runs that much more smoothly. Okay. That's it, folks. Those who haven't done their own risk profile can do so at our information portal website. There's also a free 30-day trial there. There's a 10% discount for AICPA PFP members. And if people want to follow up with me, there's my email address. And now, if we can perhaps throw it open to questions. Sarah, back to you. Or I did sort of cut. I didn't give Deborah the opportunity to talk much about establishing new client relationships and developing existing ones. Or Michael might like to add some more comment.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. We don't currently have any questions in the queue, so if any of you out in the audience would like to submit a question, please go ahead and do that now. In the meantime, I will give Deborah or Michael the floor for a couple of minutes, just for any final thoughts they'd like to share with the audience.
Michael, I'll let you go, since I think overextended my stay or my earlier comments.
I actually feel like Jeff knocked it out of the park already for us by explaining all the different ways that Finometrica can help somebody make their practice stronger. The reality is that it just works. I don't know what else to say. You know, like I said, we've used it in our practice, and we're glad we have it, and we continue to use it.
Okay, well, I'll just make a comment too, if I can. I'm not sure, there are probably some existing Finometrica subscribers in the audience, whether they use Finometrica directly via the Finometrica.com website or through one of the software integrations we have with MoneyGuide Pro and Finance Logics. In the next webinar, it's sort of been positioned as a master class. One of the things that we find is and we've started doing these a bit more recently, is that when we're actually talking to people, often people who might have been using us for 5 or 6 years, we'll start talking about an aspect of how to use the system, and they'll say, I had no idea about that. I'd never thought about that. And one of the things that we'll be doing in next week's one is looking at that in more detail. Using Phenometrica is quite different to what people in the US is quite different to what people have been doing. In other countries, there are other psychometric tests, and there are processes that are similar to ours, although nobody else is as good as we are, he says humbly. But there is quite a learning curve, and what you take out of using it in the first 6 months won't be the full picture. You will develop your skills progressively over the next 2 or 3 years. So if there are Phenometrica subscribers in the audience, or just those who would be interested in learning more detail, that's going to be covered in next week's seminar.
And Jeff, I'll throw in something else that, for those of you that know my passion, is the Phenometrica allows you to systematize some of the investment planning process. And I'm a huge advocate of developing procedures, workflows and procedures that are repeatable, where you standardize the delivery of client services, but in a way that you can also customize for an individual client. And because Phenometrica is a cloud-based solution, as Jeff mentioned, it can be integrated with financial planning software. It can be set up in your procedures as it automates part of your investment planning procedure. And this is also a compliance step. So when you can show repeatedly to a regulator that you do this you provide this type of analysis or profiling for each client, and you can show that it is a step in your procedure that is done every time, it really positions you well from a compliance standpoint, and just from an operations standpoint, it becomes a step in your procedure that can be automated. And as Michael mentioned, you send an email to your client and it reports back to you when they've completed the profile, so it's very easy to put within a firm workflow. And the psychometric testing aspect of it also, again, it's not just some random list of questions, of risk profiling questions that have no basis or you can't prove a basis. These questions have been created from a scientific study, and the results of that your clients receive or your prospects receive are based on comparison of over, what is it, Jeff, now over 400,000 people that have taken that test, correct?
Well, it's now 600,000.
600,000, oh my gosh.
We forget to update our materials. We got very excited when we got to 10,000 initially, and then 50, and then 100, and we think it's become a bit, a lot. Let's just say a lot. Yeah, more than 600,000. We have a question for Deborah and for Michael about the 2-minute elevator introduction, explaining risk tolerance to clients.
Yes, I would say that my definition of risk tolerance is a client's ability to tolerate the variability and value of their accounts. If your account is worth, I don't want to use numbers because I don't want to bias anybody, but if your account swings on a month-to-month basis, what is your threshold for that? Can it swing 1%, 10%? How would you feel if over 6 months your account went down to this? That's the risk tolerance discussion. What's your comfort level with variability in the value of your account or it's not at all because you're really not focused on what happens month to month or even year to year. You're focused on where it is in 10 years. That's risk tolerance to me.
Well, and I'll add that the nice thing about Finametrica is it addresses traditional risk tolerance and that variability of account value, but it digs even deeper than that to actually look at not just the account value, but it addresses what comfort or what level of comfort is necessary to allocate to growth assets. So it actually can help you solve not just what is the risk tolerance of your client, but what percentage of growth assets will also provide an adequate comfort level. And that's very different from a traditional risk profile.
We do have one more question before we wrap up today. Let's see, this one is from David O'Neill. He asks or states that he found the previous version of the historical performance report easier for clients to understand. The revised reports reference real returns and inflation. While that's important, I find the revisions too busy and technical for the client. Is there a possibility of providing both formats for advisors?
Good question. We did think the new version might have been somewhat overkill. We sort of put it out on a trial basis, and we are getting feedback from some along those lines. Some just love it. They don't use. For those who don't know, we have 11 essentially model portfolios ranging from 0% stocks to 100% stocks in steps of 10%, and we provide 5 pages of information about each of those, and it's risk and return information. Some subscribers absolutely love it. Some are saying it's too much. We are getting feedback on that. It's been out now. It varies a little bit from country to country, but we're coming up to around 12 months in the US. And at the end of 12 months, we will actually be gathering some formal feedback from people about how they've been using it, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, how they think we could improve it, and we will look at restructuring it. I didn't actually see that question come in, but where are we? But if you'd like to, whoever asked the question, if they'd like to actually drop me an email with their comments, specific comments, and what they like and don't like, we are collecting this, and we will get around to processing it in a couple of months' time. So by all means, drop me an email.
I think those are all the questions we have for today. So I will go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. I will point out that Jeff's email is up here on the screen for anyone who has feedback on those reports. Please send him a message with some specific comments. I'd like to thank Jeff and Deborah and Michael for their participation in today's event, and we look forward to the third and final event in the series coming up the same time next Tuesday. As we conclude, I'd like to draw your attention to an exposure draft that's available for public comment. The proposed statement on standards in personal financial planning services is available for comment until September 9th. The objective of the standard is to provide process-based guidance to AICPA members who provide PFP services, and the standard will apply to the delivery of these services, not services covered by other AICPA standards such as the tax standards. We do have a number of resources available for our PFP section members and PFS credential holders. As Jeff mentioned, we are offering a 10% discount on Finametrica. We do have a couple of white papers that are available and can be accessed through our website at aicpa.org/PFP. Deborah Fox has created a customized version of her Fox Financial Planning Network specifically for CPA financial planners who want to formalize their PFP services. This is a deeply discounted program that's not available to the public, but is for our AICPA PFP section members and credential holders. She is holding 3 practice management webcasts on September 4th, 5th, and 10th. I encourage you to sign up for those events as well, and the information on how to access those registration links is on the slide before you. Forefield Advisor is another resource available to our membership. It's a client education and communication tool written by CPAs and attorneys. If you want to find more information on risk tolerance to share with your clients, then you can use keyword search risk tolerance. As I mentioned, we have a final event in this series, the Risk Tolerance Masterclass, on Tuesday next week. In addition, we have a number of other events that are available for registration. These events are free without CPE to our PFP section members and offer discounted CPE for our membership as well. And you can find those events on our calendar at aicpa.org/PFP under CPE and events. In CPA PFS news, we have our referral program. This is a new program where you can receive credit towards your future dues. We have our PFS exam and education opportunities outlined here on the screen before you. I encourage you to visit our website to find more information about this. Thank you all for attending, and Jeff, we look forward to having you back next week.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Bob.